Hey everybody, Weston with Carry Concealment. Today I want to talk a little bit about my experience with the PDP steel and kind of go over some of the things that I feel about this gun after handling it for a little while, putting a few hundred rounds through it. It's not a review per se, just kind of an impressions sort of video that I think some of you might find interesting. Of course, recently, if you didn't see, we did release the X1 Raptor magnetic competition holster, as well as the rotor outside the waistband holster, which it has a more traditional trigger guard design for those of you who are doing something that you might need a little bit more retention than what the magnet from the X1 can provide. 3-gun, general range use, things like that. The rotor's probably the better pick for those things. If you are a competitive shooter and you know you want the bleeding edge performance, that's where the X1 comes into play. So the first thing I want to mention is this is just a very, very comfortable, high quality feeling firearm in the hand. It feels epic. This grip, the beaver tail, all the beveling they did underneath the trigger guard, the weight of the firearm, there's always an inherent feeling of quality when a gun is heavy for whatever reason. Dry firing the trigger feels amazing. The controls are all where you would expect them to be. The wraparound grip, rather than just doing adjustments on the back, having some more adjustability with different manufacturers for grips and things like that is amazing. And then of course the PDPs are all known at this point for having ridiculous slide serrations, which create a challenge for holster companies, but they are really nice for the shooters. And their plate system's pretty cool. I also like that they send you one free plate based off what you're using, so you don't get a box full of plastic plates you're never gonna use. So I think this firearm in hand feels pretty amazing, and I was excited to take it to the range. I needed to zero the firearm, and fortunately I pulled this Holosun 507 comp off of my DWX, sent a few rounds at about 30 yards at a piece of steel, a little reduced IPSC C-zone target, and it was dead on as far as I could tell. So decided I'm not gonna zero it any further than that, and let's just proceed. So the first mag I put through this thing, I was pretty content actually. It's not a really, really soft shooting gun like the Dan Wesson DWX or 2011s if you're in that market. This thing definitely behaves more like a polymer gun than those other firearms I just listed. The slide recoil and then reset is a little bit more like what you would expect out of, say, the PDP polymer or a Glock or an M&P or something like that. Given the weight and how this gun is constructed, I expected it to recoil like a DWX, which is to say a slow slide movement, and then that dot would be just kind of doing an exaggerated dip, staying within the window. In fact, it does recoil actually a little bit faster, similar to a Canik Rival Steel, I would say. And I prefer that. I actually don't like really slow recoiling guns for whatever reason. I prefer to see that dot come back very quickly. And I think with the way that I grip a gun and shoot, this thing actually does very well with that. Within the first mag, 30 yards, hitting a little piece of steel at range, it was very easy to do follow-up shots, keep that dot in view. I was actually really pleased with how this thing shot. Obviously, the Walther triggers are pretty well known at this point. It was a very, very pleasing gun to shoot. When I handed this off to the 3 other guys that I took to the range that day, everybody had the same feeling. They hold the gun, they get excited because of the way it feels in the hand. Then they shoot the gun, and then that's where we started running into some problems. Okay, before you get upset with me, just understand something. I know a lot of you guys probably own this firearm, and when I say that it's having malfunctions and having issues, that probably bugs you guys a little bit. Just know that this is a use case of one. Like, this is one gun. This is not all the guns, and it is possible that there is some user error. These are shooters that are not known to be limp wrist types. Most of these guys have shot at least a few matches of competitive shooting. We shoot on a regular basis, so I'm not saying it's not possible that they were limp wristing at that particular time, but a couple of these guys are fairly experienced, and I don't think that was the case, but the gun was having problems. So what we did was I loaded up a magazine of the steel and then a magazine for the polymer, and I had these guys shoot both guns back to back and let me know which one they prefer. Hey, real quick, which one of those feels better in your hand?
Definitely the steel. Yeah.
Definitely the steel?
Oh yeah, by far.
all kinds of malfunctions with the steel. That's cool. Okay, preferences?
That one.
The polymer one? Why is that, Logan?
Because it works.
Because it works. How about you? You didn't limp wrist, so it was fine.
It definitely feels better.
So I should mention at this point, everybody who had shot the gun had the same issue with failure to extract. The light strike could very well have been the factory ammo I was shooting.
Hands down, not even a comparison. These are not the same gun at all. There may be some design similarities. They may use the same takedown lever and mag release, but otherwise these guns could not be more different. The weight, the ergonomics, everything else about it other than literally the slider release and the mag release is completely different. So what is this thing like to shoot? Well, if you're used to shooting a polymer striker fire gun, you're probably going to be really impressed with how this thing feels. I mean, it's heavier. The controls are basically the same. The ergonomics are better and the trigger's better. So it's probably going to recoil a little bit more gently. You're going to have an easier time tracking the dot. And it's just taking away some of the possibilities of shooter error by being a higher quality piece of equipment, in my opinion. Now, does that mean a high quality shooter with the polymer gun couldn't still stomp you with the steel frame gun? Absolutely. That's the little golden trick, right? You can give a high-end shooter basically any firearm that functions well, and they will still pound you into the sand with your super high-end nice firearm because they've got the skill set to do so. Now, does this gun provide some benefits over this gun? Abso-freaking-lutely. This thing is much better to shoot than the polymer gun. But ultimately, that really only comes down to how much time and effort you're willing to put into your skill set. If you're the guy that's going to spend maybe once or twice, you're going to dry fire a month, which is currently about as good as I'm doing right now, there is a benefit to shooting a nicer firearm, and it can help me be more proficient on the range. Is that enough to bump me from, say, a B-class shooter to an A-class shooter, or beat my friends by seconds on time or something at a local match? Absolutely not. But it is enough for me to feel good when I go to the range, and you know, it's fun. It's arguably fun to have cool guns to share with your friends, go to the range, and be able to shoot. It's an enjoyable experience, and that's okay. And if that is all the justification you need to go buy the new PDP steel, I say it's worth it. Go do it. This is a cool firearm, and I think Walther did a really great job with this thing. These are not inexpensive guns, and by the time you put a red dot on them, you're well over $2,000. And so it needs to perform like a $2,000 gun. And that's the question. Does this stack up with other guns in the price point? Let's forget about what guns it competes with as far as on a competition scene, because the DWX is a gun that is in a similar price point. You can get a Prodigy and a red dot for less than this gun. There's a lot of high-end firearms in the $1,400 to $2,000 range. And does this stack up with those firearms? Anyways, that's my my little experience with the PDP steel. I think this is a phenomenal firearm, all said. I hope you guys have a really great experience with your PDP steels. There's definitely a lot of hype behind this thing right now, and I can see why. I would love for mine to clean up its act, so to speak, and start shooting nicely. Maybe with the fresh oil that I put on there and a few more 100 rounds, it'll do so. Who knows? Maybe I'll let you guys know in the future, because this thing is pretty awesome in hand, and I would love to continue to play with it some more. But hope you guys found that somewhat interesting. Again, if you're looking for holsters, we've got the X1 Raptor and the Rotor available for this thing right now. Light bearing options will be coming soon. And for those of you who have been sleeping on the Holosun PID, maybe have a look at that weapon light, because I'm starting to include that in every lineup of new firearms for a very good reason. So, take care.